blessings if she didn't choose to live by faith. There are many people, sadly, that do the opposite. But in the unknowns in regards to marriage, a person who's living by faith seeks God's glory in their life. They refuse to be unequally yoked together. And they also delight themselves in the Lord. And they wait patiently on Him. You know, and if you're in that situation at the moment, and you're choosing, I'm going to obey God before anything else, that is living by faith. You know, we can turn up and say, I don't know what your name is, Bob, live by faith, by obeying God instead of taking it. It's living by faith. You know, there are many journeys that we all have to go down that are going to bring unknowns. You know, the missionary is faced with a lot of unknowns. I'm not an expert on missionaries, but I do know that there would be some unknowns. Will the Lord keep us safe? Will the Lord provide for us? And then probably the other million that come after that. That's about the limit of my knowledge of being a missionary. But I tell you, there are a lot of unknowns. But all the missionary needs to be convinced of and sure in their heart is God has called them to that field, and then trust God for all those unknowns as the time comes. You know, even witnessing brings a lot of unknowns, isn't there? Isn't it true the reason why we don't witness more than what we do is simply because of the unknown? You know, is that working? Good. I try not to look at the person when I do that. When we're witnessing or trying to stay awake, there's a lot of unknowns, isn't there? But isn't it true? If God told you, if you go and share the gospel with that person, they're going to fall to their knees, tears coming down their face, and they're going to cry out to the Saviour to cleanse their soul and purify them. And they're going to stand up, they're going to give you the biggest bear hug and thank you from the bottom of their heart for sharing the gospel with them. If you knew that was the response, would you even have a second thought about going up and telling them about Christ? I don't think any of us would. I'd be running up to tell them about Christ. And so what is the reason why we don't do that when the opportunity comes to share Christ? Because we don't know if that's going to happen or not. We don't know if we share the gospel with them, they're going to turn on us and never want to be our friend again. We don't know if they're going to make life hard for us in the work situation. We don't know if they're going to think we're an idiot and tell us to get lost. We don't know. But somebody who lives by faith, when it comes to the unknowns in witnessing, obeys what God says and leaves the unknowns up to Him. Telling the truth at work. Tell the truth, I might lose my job. Everyone else in the workplace might hate me because I told the truth. What should I do? Well, there's always unknowns. Well, like the tax man, if I tell the truth to the tax man, I might actually not be able to have anything to eat. What should I do? A lot of unknowns, but God says, tell the truth. That's living by faith. And we see from Abraham's example of a man who did live by faith, that when God told him to do something, he obeyed, despite the fact that from that commandment brought lots of unknowns. And brethren, God has told us lots of things in His Word. There are thousands of things that He's told us to do in His Word. And with each one of these commandments, there are going to be probably 100 unknowns that come as a result of that. But somebody who lives by faith will actually say, what does God want me to do in this situation? And thus I will do it. That's all that living by faith is. And I wonder if there's something that the Lord's been telling you to do. Is there a path or a journey He said, this is the path I want you to go down? You know, it may be as simply as saying, I want you to get real about the local church that you attend. that you start supporting that local church and you get involved in a ministry where you use your gifts and talents that I've given you and you glorify me through your life and bring about that great commission of telling the gospel through that local church that I've established. And God just wants you to get serious about serving Him. If the Lord's been telling you to do something and the fear of not knowing what will happen if I do, or the fear of what the journey will happen and how will people respond, if these are the things that are stopping you, brethren, you're not living by faith. Now can I ask you, do you really believe that God's way can actually be worse than your ways? That's what we're saying. Do you really believe that you can do things better than God? You know, can we actually be so proud to think that in our planning for our life and our planning of what we should do can actually be better than God's plans for our life? Now, God's ways are always the best. How can we know better than the Almighty, the all-knowing, the all-wise, the one that has been there from the beginning and the ending, the one that has seen life after life and He's seen the mistakes that they have made? He knows what's best. Surely we're not so proud to turn around and say, well, I think I know better than you. You see, brethren, the reason why Abraham was able to leave his country and leave his home and leave all the security that he had was simply because he believed that God's way was better than his. Now, don't take my word for it. We're told that in Hebrews. Let's have a look there in Hebrews. Let me read verse 8 again to you, chapter 11. It says, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which he should after receive as an inheritance, obeyed. And then go down to verse 10. Because he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He searched for a city that God made. We may turn around and say, how on earth could Abraham do that? Leave all that security behind and just go out not knowing where he's going? Simply, it's this. He searched for a city that God had made. Now, there is some confusion about what the writer meant by this. Was Abraham looking for Jerusalem, the literal city, or was he looking for heaven? Now, that's a discussion, a debate out in the college rooms. I'm not interested in that, because regardless of what the answer is, you come to the same conclusion. And that is, Abraham knew that what God had to offer was better. That's what he knew. He wasn't looking to his own buildings or his own efforts to satisfy him. He wasn't standing back and saying, look, all this has to be better than what you have to offer, God. No. He believed that God's ways were better than his ways, and he believed that what God had to offer was far better than anything he could get for himself. He believed that, and what happened? Did he stay there? It produced actions. And he went searching, and he obeyed what God told him to do. And brethren, if we believe this about God, if we are believing that His ways are better than our ways, and that His plans for our life are better than our plans for our life, well then it will produce the exact same actions in us when we are faced with the unknowns in our life. And that action will be obedience to His word. And if God's been telling you to seek His kingdom first because you haven't been lately, or if He's been telling you to not to be unequally yoked together with an unbeliever because you have been lately, or if He's been telling you to start serving and be committed to your local church because you haven't been lately, or to surrender to His will for your life, or to witness to that person at work, or to go somewhere or start something